it's the worst reading month of my life. Hi pals, I'm Casey, and this has been the worst reading month of my life. I finally got over a terrible reading slump and depressive episode, started reading a ton again, and almost everything was bad, or disappointing, or problematic, or I just fucking hated it. And this includes some, like, things that I thought I was gonna love. So let's do the fucking August wrap up. Hi, I'm Casey. I do all the things that your other favorite booktubers do, and let's just get into this shit today. So this was the worst reading month of my life. I had a terrible time. Everything I read was just so disappointing. So let's just dig in. I gave no rating to So Witches We Became by Jill Bagachinsky, 1 star to Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi, 2 stars to Survive the Night by Danielle Vega, Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey, Gleanings by Neil Schusterman, A Spartan Sorrow by Hannah Lynn, and Hera by Jennifer Saint. I gave 3 stars to, and some of these are very generous 3 stars, The Jinn Waits 100 Years by Shubnam Khan, The Book Eaters by Sunyi Dean, The Nightmare Box and Other Short Stories by Cynthia Gomez, A Haunting on the Hill by Elizabeth Hand, Unlikable Female Characters by Anna Bogutskaya, Chainsaw Man Volume 13 by Tatsuki Fujimoto, Ithaca by Claire North, City of Saints and Madmen by Jeff Vandermeer, The Way Spring Arrives and Other Stories, Tidal Creatures by Shauna Maguire, The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice, Never Whistle at Night, and The Best Works of Edgar Allan Poe. I gave 4 stars to The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver, I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones, Little Rot by Akwaeke Emezi, The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey, and The Watchers by A.M. Shine. And my 2 5-stars for the month were Except for Palestine by Mark Lamont Hill and Mitchell Plitnick, and Disfigured by Amanda Leduc. Okay, that's a lot of books. I finally got over a massive reading slump, and just to read shit. I was so mad. I was so mad. It felt like everything I was reading was so disappointing. So we're gonna do something a little different today, and I am going to go from the best to the worst because I have so much more worst to talk about. The best book that I read this month are just hands down the 2 non-fiction. Except for Palestine is a critique primarily of US politics, especially US liberal politics that claim to be pro-human rights, but somehow are always except for Palestinians. This is an incredible, very short work. It's a great audiobook if you have the chance to pick it up that way. And honestly, I think that if you're just learning about Palestinian rights and the suffering that the Palestinian people have undergone, I think this is an exceptional place to start. This is not too bogged down. It will give you a bunch of things that are really common talking points that you can chime in on and provide light on, while not being so overwhelming, and it's very well done. Really quickly, because I forgot to talk about this at the beginning. Hi, I'm still participating in the St. Martin's Press boycott. I know that Readers for Accountability called off the boycott. That might be the wrong language, but made a post saying that they were no longer participating in it, running it. I don't know all the details. I've watched several videos from several people about it, and honestly, the videos and the opinions I care about the most are Palestinian and Muslim and Arab community members who feel like this was a bad decision and feel that and are not going to stop the boycott. So I am going to do the same. I don't read a lot of St. Martin's Press anyways. I don't purposely not seek them out because there's a boycott going on. I just don't pick them up. They just happen to be titles I'm not really interested in, and there's only been 2 that I've read this year. And so that is just going to continue here. It's not something I talk about a lot, but will be something I continue to participate in. The other nonfiction I read was Disfigured by Amanda Leduc. This is specifically talking about fairy tales and ableism and the disability rep in fairy tales and the way it shapes our minds and the way we see disabled people in the world. This was really good. It was really exceptional. Again, another great audiobook, and I think that both of these books just were heads and tails above everything else I read this month. My most surprising read for this month was The Watchers by A.M. Shine. This is a horror. This is following a woman who, I believe this is set in Ireland, and she is going out to deliver a bird one day, and she gets lost in the woods and then finds a cabin in the woods where people are shouting for her to come inside because she is going to get caught and killed if she doesn't. This is, and it just gets stranger and weirder from there. It was honestly just a really good book. It was such a delightful palate cleanser, and I just had a good time with it. It was creepy, it was weird, it was upsetting, and it dealt with a lot of like creepy mythology, which I really loved, and I loved having just a feel-good book amongst all the shit that I read this month. The most meh for this month, I'm gonna give to 2 books. I have a lot of books that I thought were really terrible, so I'm just gonna talk about several of them. The first disappointing book I want to talk about is The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. This is the sequel to Interview with the Vampire, and this is following Lestat, who's a character in that, and this is sort of his life story. And honestly, this is entirely too long. This is so long. This is so dense, so unnecessarily dense, and it was just goddamn boring. It was goddamn boring. There was nothing going on in here. There was stuff going on here, in this portion, and this portion. The rest of this, nothing. This could have been cut down by like 300 pages. Why was there so much of this? This was just a lot of, I know that this is Anne Rice working through a lot of like, her difficulties with her religious upbringing at the time, but it was extremely boring. It was extremely boring to hear a vampire constantly whinging about being immortal and like not wanting to kill people and like, oh, I actually wasn't as bad as I was in the first book, but you wouldn't know that because Louis is a little bit too self-centered. It was too much. It was too much, and it was really meh, and I had a very bad time with this. My other meh book is gonna go Tidal Creatures by Seanan McGuire. If you saw my recent, what's it called? 5-star predictions. This was on there, and this ended up being exactly what I thought it was. I thought it was gonna be 5-star, I thought it was gonna be 3-star, and it was a 3-star, and that is a little generous in my opinion. I did not super love Seasonal Fears, but at least thought it was a good ride. Tidal Creatures is the 3rd book in the Alchemical Journeys series. This is the 3rd Middle Game book, and honestly, it was fine. It was fine. There was but it was so frustrating. I wanted there to be more, and I finished the book. I felt like I'd had a good time. I wanted to read it the whole time I was reading it, and then I got to the end, and I sat with it for about an hour, and I went, no, there were all these things that got missed along the way. It's better than Seasonal Fears, but it feels like there were so many things that were interesting, but just left on the table, and the ending was so goddamn rushed. And yeah, that's it. I'm not even gonna give you a synopsis for this because it's the 3rd book in the series, and even though they don't even follow all the same shit, I don't really want to talk about it anymore. My most disappointing books of the month, because there are going to be 2. The first is Gleanings by Neal Shusterman. This is a series of short stories from the Arc of the Scythe universe, and honestly, I had a miserable time with this. I feel like this didn't need to be a book. This didn't need to be published. All this does is highlight all the problematic shit in the series. All the shit that you're easily like walking away from being like, nope, that's kind of a problem, but I'm invested in the world and the characters. This just puts into like full Technicolor right in your face. There's a whole short story that's based off of this misunderstanding of the phrase trick or treat, calling it trigger treat, and that shit is annoying. It's bad. It's bad writing, and it's lazy, especially whenever you start digging into the fact that the history of trick or treat is over 100 years old at the point of whenever this starts. Whenever the Thunderhead takes over, it's well over, I think, 150 years old. And Halloween as a concept and as an event, and you know, the origins of it are much older than that. Every other short story I thought was just, it was either absolutely boring or it just highlighted the problems in this. I wanted this to be so much more interesting. I had a miserable time with it. And the other most disappointing book is Hera by Jennifer Saint. This was another 5-star prediction, and this book gave me a headache. I did not want to read this after a certain point. Jennifer Saint does more feminist takes on Greek retellings, and this is kind of that. It's honestly just sort of a resuscitation of all the stories that Hera is involved in without actually changing too terribly much. The first portion was fairly interesting. I think it gave Hera a lot of character and a lot of intrigue. I think it was a very good exploration of her as a mythological being and as a god and as the queen of the gods. But overall, there was no promise that this book met. It was flat, characters were one-dimensional, Hera was one-dimensional, and it just felt like ultimately this was just, hey, these are all the things that Hera was involved in without actually sort of changing anything. And again, it's the same kind of thing as like Tidal Creatures, right? There was a lot of promise, but nothing was really delivered. Everything was very flat, one note, and any sort of interesting take this could have had felt like it got left on the cutting room floor just to include more myths in here. And I hated it. It gave me a headache. I was miserable by the end, and I did not want to be reading this anymore. And my worst book of August, Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi. This is the story of Boy, a young girl in, is there a year on this? Yes, 1953, in New York, who leaves her abusive father and leaves home, and then goes and meets a man, falls in love with him, agrees to take care of his daughter from a previous marriage, Snow, becomes pregnant with her child, Bird, and then sends Snow away. It's very loosely a Snow White retelling. This is, okay, let's just cut to the chase. Let's cut to the chase. This has the most transphobic ending I've read in a while. To this book's credit, which there's not a lot to give, to be fair, I think it's well written. Helen Oyeyemi, for the most part, has this very layered writing where it feels like everything has multiple layers to it, and it can make some of her work confusing. I've read 2 of her books previously and enjoyed both of them, but it does make them feel a bit like a fever dream. This is the most direct of her work that I've read, and it is also just the most problematic. The fact that the ending in here is Boy's abusive father is actually just a traumatized, raped lesbian who took that trauma and transitioned, but isn't really trans. It's terrible. It's bad. I felt very confused by the ending. I knew this was coming. I bought this book, I want to say 4 years ago, before I knew about it, and I had seen shortly after I purchased it about the transphobic ending. But I decided to read it because it was on my shelves and I wanted to get through it. So I knew it was coming, and when I got to the ending, I felt confused whether that was supposed to be her takeaway or not. So I looked up some trans voices who had read this and who talked about the critiques of it, and the consensus seems to be that it's extremely transphobic, and it feels like a gut punch to a lot of trans people who read this. So I'm going to defer to the people who are hurt by this book. Okay, that's my August wrap up. Thanks. This was really ranty today. I hope you had a better month than I did. Please feel free to tell me about your worst book that you read in August down below. Someone please tell me I'm not alone in there's just being a shit month for reading. I will see you next Friday. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Bye, pals. Feel free to do algorithm things. Okay, bye.